Hi, welcome to Therapy JA. Each week we interview mental health advocates and different mental health professionals on numerous topics, and we have numerous different conversations. The purpose of Therapy JA is to remove the negative stigma of mental health, and to clarify certain issues as well as answer questions that certain people in the Caribbean as well as the diaspora may have on mental health. Once again, we are a resource page and just like a clarification page. We do not provide mental health services. We are just a resource page. We can provide resources for people who are interested, but we do not provide mental health advice, we do not provide mental health advice nor counsel. So with that being said, this week I really wanted to do something on ADHD and the stigma of ADHD. And today I have an ADHD advocate, Margaux Joffe. Can you hear me, Margaux? You froze for a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Margaux. So Margaux is someone I've known over the years. I met her when I was in New York. But Margaux, if you could please just tell us your story right now. Just introduce yourself and tell us your story. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me. And thank you for all the work you're doing with Therapy JA and trying to reduce the stigma and support folks' mental health in the Caribbean and beyond. So I met you in New York when I was working as a creative producer, and fast forward over 10 years later, I now live in Seattle, Washington. I'm a board certified cognitive specialist and a certified accessibility professional. And basically the focus of my work is creating a more inclusive world for minds of all kinds. So I help companies be more inclusive for employees and customers who may have disabilities, and I also run programs for individuals.
Okay, how did you get started in that? What motivated you? Could you go from creative producer to cognitive specialist?
Yeah, I never planned this. If you asked me 10 years ago what I would be doing, I probably would have said still producing. I loved working in the creative field, but really what inspired me was my personal experience. So I started having some struggles with my mental health when I was around 18, but I didn't really get support for it until over a decade later when I was actually diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 29. And I'm 39 now, so that was about 10 years ago. And I was super surprised. I never thought I had ADHD because all I knew about it was stereotypes, like people with ADHD, they're not smart, or they can't do well in school, or they're hyperactive and bouncing off the walls, or they're lazy, a lot of these stereotypes that exist about ADHD. So when I did get diagnosed, I was surprised. I thought I never knew that I had it. And I really just went onto Google and started looking for information about ADHD in adult women. And I was struggling at the time to find information, resources, and community for adult women with ADHD. And so I started seeking out other women, and we, sharing our experiences with each other, and ultimately thought about how can I help other people like myself. And that led to creating a website, a platform for women with ADHD called Kaleidoscope Society. And so on that website, I interviewed other women with ADHD across the United States and then ultimately around the world to shine a light on our lived experiences. And we also collaborated with experts to bring curated expert advice to the community. So much like the work that you're doing, really just to raise awareness, dispel stigma, and share tips and advice that can help people, just support their well-being and live easier with ADHD. So that's really how I got into this work. And then through that work, I started doing work within the corporate environment, creating peer resource groups for neurodivergent employees within Silicon Valley, and then eventually became a certified accessibility professional, working on a team to help make technology accessible for people with disabilities. And then about 2 years ago, I started my own company called Minds of All Kinds, and we're a platform for neurodivergent people to learn about their unique brains, to connect with peers, and to learn how to be leaders and educators in their schools, workplaces, and communities.
Could we talk about the spectrum of neurodivergency? Like, what would you consider to be the spectrum of that, of a neurodivergent individual?
Yeah, and let's just first define the term, because for a lot of people listening, this may be a new word, like what even is neurodiversity, right? So neurodiversity is short for neurological diversity, basically the spectrum of neurocognitive functioning in human species. And simply put, it means that there's all types of brains in humans. And neuroscientists have said, there's no such thing as a normal brain. There's a whole spectrum of the way that brains can work. We all learn, think, communicate differently. And so the cool thing about neurodiversity, it kind of takes us out of this thinking of these two boxes of like, you're either in the normal box or you're the not normal box. And neurodiversity creates this awareness that, all of us are different. We all have different types of brains. And it's all about recognizing people's unique strengths, and that everybody has a unique strength to contribute, and everyone has areas where they need support in life, right? So it takes us away from pathologizing difference. So just because you have something that's different, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. So the different examples when you use the word neurodivergent, so the term neurodivergent can refer to anyone whose brain may work a little bit differently from what is considered typical, right, within the society that they live in. So some examples of neurodivergent conditions could be ADHD, which is Attention Defecit Hyperactivity Disorder, autism spectrum disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, bipolar disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, those are governed from learning disabilities. So really any number of things, basically, if you have a brain that works a little bit differently from what is considered typical. And while these conditions are classified as disorders, it doesn't mean that there's anything inherently wrong with the individual, right? This is just how we as a society have named and labeled things. And so it's important to approach it with understanding and empathy, and understanding that, we're all different. So it doesn't mean, again, that something's inherently wrong with the person.
I gotta ask you, so like when you got the diagnosis, did it feel like certain things started to connect? Well, like certain issues you had in the past? Like how'd you feel when you got that diagnosis?
Absolutely. Like there were so many aha moments after I got the diagnosis, and things started to make sense. And looking back on my life and having those thoughts of like, oh, that's why that happened. So just like a few examples, when I was learning about ADHD and I saw some traits that, people with ADHD, they may have the tendency to interrupt other people in meetings or conversation or finish people's sentences. And I was like, oh man, I do that. And I didn't realize that I did that before. And so it really helped me also just gain more self-awareness, just more awareness of my own behaviors, how I was showing up. And it empowered me, because then I was able to become aware of it and then make conscious decisions around, okay, how do I want to show up differently, perhaps? Another example is, I'm really sensitive to sensory stimuli. So like music, lights, sound, smells, all of these things. And so for many people with ADHD, they can have these kind of sensory processing challenges where they can get overwhelmed. Because as humans, we're surrounded by so much sensory information all the time in our environments. And for some people, their brains are really good at automatically filtering out a lot of extraneous information that they don't need. For people with ADHD, a lot of times we're very sensitive to the stimuli in our environment. So we notice little things. And so you may see that people with ADHD, they're maybe the one to point out something cool, like, oh, did you see that little bird in the tree, or picking up something in the music. And so this can make people with ADHD really good in the creative fields, because they have an eye and they can tune into the smallest details. But on the flip side, this can also make sometimes the environment be overwhelming. So for example, I remember when I lived in New York, there was a few times that I had like panic attacks, and I didn't even know that that's what that was at the time. I remember I went to a concert. They had those free concerts in Central Park in New York.
Yeah.
And I went to one, and it was like a picnic situation. So there was like hundreds of people with their picnic blankets, and there was, just on this massive field, and there was a concert happening and people talking and so much going on. And all of a sudden, and I was there with my friends, like having a great time. I was happy to be there. And then all of a sudden I noticed in my body, like I started feeling like my chest was tightening. I was like getting like really overwhelmed and emotional for no reason. And it was really weird. And it was just kind of this overwhelming sensation. And I didn't know what was going on, but I just told my friends, I was like, hey, I'm tired. I'm going to go home. And I remember I like tried to quickly get out through this sea of people. And I got out onto the path in Central Park, and I just started like crying, like having this emotional response. And I was so embarrassed because I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like,
yeah, you didn't understand. Yeah.
I was like, what's wrong with me? You're too, I had these messages to myself, like, you're being too sensitive. Like, what's wrong with you? You're so emotional. And now looking back with compassion, I can see, I have sensory processing sensitivity. So, I'm just mindful of that in my environment. When on my keychain, I have a pair of little earplugs in a case. And so if I'm in an environment where there's really big crowds, or it's really loud and noisy, sometimes I'll just put those in. So I can still like hear what's happening, but it's not as overwhelming. So I think it's just about getting to know ourselves and then honoring our sensitivities, so that we can move through the world with less stress.
And not judging ourselves for the sensitivities,
Yeah. But let me talk about attention and ADHD, because
Okay.
that's a primary thing we talk about, right? So when you think about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, there's this understanding that if you have ADHD, you can't pay attention, which is
Yeah.
actually not accurate. So with ADHD, it's a difference in how attention is regulated in our brain. So Dr. Lara Honos-Webb, who's a worldwide ADHD expert, she uses the metaphor of a flashlight, which I really like. So she says that all of us, we're always paying attention when we're awake. And it's just a matter of, are we paying attention to the right things, quote unquote, the things that we're supposed to be paying attention to. So with ADHD, we're always paying attention. It's just a matter of, are we paying attention to the things that we want to be doing? Then there's different qualities of attention. So like a flashlight, sometimes we might have diffuse attention. So that's like when you have kind of like a soft light that's very widespread, where we may just be in a daydreaming state. That's called hypofocus. Or we may be like in a laser focused state. So, when the flashlight, it's like a small beam that's really pinpointing on something.
Yeah.
That's called hyperfocus. And so for people with ADHD, we can actually hyperfocus on things we're really interested in. So if somebody with ADHD is super interested in a project or a topic, they may be able to spend, 6 hours at a time editing a video or researching the topic or working on a project of their interest. So people with ADHD, they can focus on things that are interesting to them, that are challenging, that are novel, that are stimulating for them.
Can I ask you? All right.
And so yeah, I can relate to that. So in terms of, for me, what I focus really well on is like anything with design. Like I can just do it for hours and I feel very fulfilled. I feel really good doing it. So I'll just be like, oh man, I'll just be doing it. And when I'm finished with the task, I'm like, oh, I feel refreshed. Well, if it's a task that you're not that passionate about, you'll do it, but it feels laborious and it feels like a chore. You know what I mean? So that's what design does for me. And, and I think that's why a lot of designers or artists really stay within their field and put so much of their identity in their field, because they're really like, because they're definitely who they are as a person is in that. So they're like, I have to work within this field because this is what I feel good and this is kind of who I am. So I just wanted to add to that. But I have a question in terms of work, in work culture. How does ADHD or being neurodivergent affect someone in work, in the work culture, like 9 to 5 culture? Can it be difficult for them to navigate it, or is it normally easy? Like, especially because you care a lot about that in terms of workers' rights in that field.
Yeah, absolutely. So it impacts everyone differently because everyone with ADHD is different and it really depends on their situation. So for people like yourself, if somebody has been able to create and build a career that's really in line with the things they're interested in, the things that energize them, that bring them fulfillment, then typically that person is going to have less friction. They're going to have less issues, right? Because they're in a field that that is interesting to them, that they're passionate about, right? So that's number one of the best things that anyone can do, period, but especially for people with ADHD or any type of neurodivergent condition, is trying to find a career field and a path that is where you feel that you're able to be your best, that your gifts are really shining through. So for you with design, that's wonderful that you've found this field that really lights you up and energizes you. So that's really can be super helpful. But then let's also be honest, right? Because there's a lot of things in life and even in our jobs that we will need to do, adulting, that maybe we don't, it's annoying, it's boring, it's not in line with our strengths, it's not in our area of strength. And so for that's where it can be helpful to have some tools and strategies, knowing that, maybe 80% of my job is things that are aligned with my strengths and my interests, but maybe there's 20% of things that are more difficult for me. They're boring. I really don't want to do them, but we have to do them to survive and get through.
Yep. That's like bills. That's like bills or going through, like, oh my gosh, paying bills or going through like the application process. I hate that. Like, that to me is a chore. Like, if it's one thing I wish I could skip, is that. But because of, like, you have to survive and you have to figure it out, you're just like, well, as an adult, we just have to make this work. So I just have to pay these bills. I have to go to this, like, to the DMV. I have to go here to pay my bills. That's what we have to do. Like, I was in the tax office. In Jamaica, we call it the tax office. I was there the whole day just to, like, get my ID because my driver's license expired. And I was just like, yo, man, this is ridiculous. Like, but I just knew it's just like certain things you have to do to it's the mundane things to get through, the regular thing. And I think the mundane for, like, someone with, like, ADHD is the work, like, it's annoying, but I know I just have to get through it.
Yeah. So what are some things that you do to help you get through those mundane chores?
I mean,
I have my phone. Like, if I'll be on my phone, like, going through, like, scanning information. And so even like yesterday, most of the times I just make friends with, like, because everybody's in, like, in the line, everybody's there waiting. So, you know what I mean? So, you're in the DMV, you just start talking to people around you and just saying, like, man, this is so ridiculous. And then, and I feel like that makes the time go by faster. But my phone, man, when my phone dies, I'm like, oh, Christ. So now I have to just, like, talk to people and just, like, go through it. What about you?
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I do depending on the situation. But one of the things I do is, like, accountability partners, or basically, like, the buddy system. So if there's something like an errand I need to do that I'm really putting off, for example, if, like, one time my dishes were, like, just out of control in my sink, and I know this is, like, a silly example, but I had baked something in a pan, and I had been baking these muffins, and then they got stuck onto the pan. So then I'm like, let me let it soak in the sink, right? Because then it will be easier to wash. So I was letting it soak, but then, like, a couple of days had gone by, and then it was disgusting, and I didn't want to touch it. And, and the dishes were piling up, and when there's just so many dishes and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this.
you feel overwhelmed. So you're like,
yeah.
I don't even want to start.
And then I felt embarrassed. I felt embarrassed because I had these, I'm like, I should have been cleaning this, so then I literally told my sister, I was like, I need to do my dishes tonight, and I am going to send you a picture when I'm done, and I want you to, like, send me all the happy emojis and all the celebrating GIFs. Like, I need you to like cheer me on this task because I'm really facing like a mental block with it. And I know I'm just giving you like a really small example.
That's good. That's good. Because
And
I have the same thing with dishes.
yeah. And she's like, let's fucking go. So then I went and like later that night and I did my dishes and then I sent her the picture and she celebrated with me. And it just kind of transformed that thing that I was dreading into like, I did it. And then I felt that sense of accomplishment. So sometimes, and I mean, that's not something I do every day when I need to do the dishes, but when you come to those moments in your day-to-day life where something has been piling up or you're really procrastinating something, sometimes it can really help to like use the buddy system. Or even just this term body doubling. So you may have heard the term body doubling that is becoming more and more in use within the ADHD community. Simply put, it basically means doing something with someone else present. And that can mean the person is with you, like you're in a cafe working. So sometimes people go to cafes to work on something because there's other people sitting around and it makes them feel like they can get into the task. Or there's websites where you can do it virtually. So there's a website called FocusMate where you can sign up and say, oh, at 11 a.m., I'm going to work on this presentation I need to do for work. And it will automatically match you with someone anywhere in the world who also has work to do. And you get on a little Zoom, you share what you're going to do. And then you like put your camera and your microphone on mute and you go and do your task. And there's a little timer. And at the end, the little timer will chime and you can come back and share what you did.
That's actually really cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah, FocusMate. And they have a free version. So I think the free version, you get like 3 sessions a week. So I've used that before as well. But you can also do it with a friend. Like I have another friend who's also an entrepreneur, right? So I work for myself, which can be challenging because I don't have a manager that's checking in with me to say, did you do your things you needed to do this week? So my other friend who's an entrepreneur, sometimes if we're working on a big project, we'll share with each other what we're working on and just encourage each other and share when we finish things. I also have another friend who's autistic, and we both struggle with those mundane kind of like administrative tasks. So anytime we do an administrative task or like a chore, sometimes we'll just text each other and celebrate. So I think he's like, if he goes to pick up his dry cleaning, or if he pays a bill that he had been putting off, or like submits his taxes, right? He'll like text me, he'll be like, I just got my dry cleaning and went to the grocery store. And I'll be like, fuck yeah. And we'll like, send each other emojis. So I think, people that are listening to this, you may think, well, those are such simple things, but for some people, those seemingly simple mundane tasks can be more challenging than big complex projects at work, right? So that's kind of the ironic thing about ADHD, is that sometimes we can do the big things, but then these small things can cause some challenges. And the reason why, to understand why that is in the brain, is that with ADHD, the skills of executive functioning can be impaired. So executive functioning skills are in the part of the brain right behind our forehead called the prefrontal cortex. And executive functioning skills are skills like planning, organizing, task activation, which means getting started on a task, working memory, remembering information long enough to use it, decision making, all of these kind of skills that you need to get things done at work or in your personal life. And everyone with ADHD is different. So not everyone will struggle with all of these tasks or all of these things. But it's important to know that people with ADHD, they're not lazy. If you see a friend or your child or your coworker who may be struggling to get organized on a project or to get started on a task, just know it doesn't mean that they're lazy or they're being defiant. They may be struggling with some executive functioning skills. And it doesn't mean that they can't do these skills. It means it may take them a little bit longer. It may take more energy or effort to get those kind of things done. So something that can be helpful is breaking down big projects into small, manageable steps. So you can do that for yourself or somebody else. So if you find yourself struggling to get started on a project, you can ask yourself, what's the easiest first step? And maybe that's simply opening up your computer and opening up the application you need to do, like opening up the document. Or you can set a timer. Like I have a visual timer, a time timer.
Wow.
And, you can say, look, I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I'm just going to literally just work on this for 5 minutes and see how much I can get done.
Yeah.
So I do that sometimes when I'm
That's
dreading.
cool.
Yeah. So it's a little visual timer.
Yeah.
So you can set it for how much
Hey, that's really cool. Yeah.
So it can be like, look, I'm overwhelmed right now with putting together this whole presentation. I'm just going to work for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just see how far I get. And most times, once we start getting into the doing, we build momentum.
Yeah.
And then the timer goes off and it's like, okay, now I'm in the flow. Now I'm in the zone and I can keep going with this.
Can I tell you, I've been trying to do, so what I, like when I draw, like, because I got back in the habit of drawing and I did it in like, I just said, okay, I'll do drawing a day, I'll do a sketch. And I don't have to finish the sketch completely, but I just do it. So you just do one and I'm like, okay, I feel good about that. And I do it the next day, I finish it. To the point where, it becomes a habit. And so I have been like, it's not dreading, but it has been so difficult for me to start this. I'm gonna do this like coding class online. And it's been like so difficult for me to start. Like I can do any other thing. I can like draw, I'll get every other errand done. But that one task to start, and I'm just like, all right, let me just do one video, like watch one video and just write notes and I'll start. But it's been like, but I appreciate that so much in terms of just saying, okay, let me do like 5 minutes, 10 minutes on it and just build the momentum of, okay, I'm starting. Like that's really, it's very important.
And I would also say sometimes those self-paced courses can be challenging.
Yeah.
Those self-paced video courses, because even if you're interested in the topic, you have a motivation, right? You want to learn how to code or you want to increase your coding skills. Sometimes it requires a lot of motivation and willpower and like planning, because you have to decide, you have to make decisions. When am I going to do it? Let me put it in my calendar. Now let me go in and actually do it and sit here and focus on it, which can be difficult because there's not an external structure versus like when we're in school and it's like, we have to go to this class on Monday morning at 9 a.m. and the teacher's going to be there. And if we're not showing up, someone's going to be calling us. Yeah. There's that external structure. And for a lot of people with ADHD, external structure, sometimes we complain about it, but it can actually be helpful for us because, again, it reduces the decision-making, it reduces the cognitive load required to do the thing because we don't need to think as much about it. It's like, oh, I just need to show up and I need to be there. And once I'm there, my friends are going to be there. We're going to be doing this class together. So, I think the truth is like, it's hard to do things alone sometimes. And as humans, we're really not designed to work and live in isolation. And I think in modern society, especially with COVID, we've seen a lot of people, some people struggle with the work from home if they're isolated in the working from home. So for some people that are working from home and they're alone all day and maybe they don't have family, for some people that can be tough because we evolved as humans in communities, and we aren't designed to live and work in isolation. So again, that's where the body doubling can be helpful. So like with the coding class, do you know anyone else that is taking it, or do you have a friend that's also interested? And then setting up a structure to say, hey, my buddy also wants to learn how to code. Let's meet up every Wednesday evening and we'll like eat together, and then we'll watch like 30 minutes and then we'll just hang out, and kind of like creating a external structure for yourself with another person that can create momentum, and it can create more motivation just to make it easier. So I would say like, don't be too hard on yourself, because I think a lot of people struggle with the self-paced course. I know I personally, I paid for a course one time and I never even did it at all. And I felt so guilty, and I was like, oh my God, I wasted this money. And then I was beating myself up. And so but then we learn, right? Understanding what environments are going to be best for us.
Yeah, I did Skillshare at one point. Back in the day, I used to do Skillshare, and I'd paid, and I would never read it. And I was like, yo, man, I'm paying the subscription monthly. It's coming out of my account, and I'm not using this. It's funny. A friend of mine told me to say it was the same thing with him. He was like, I spent all of these money on these subscriptions, and I don't use them. So it was, but it happens. It happens, and I think it is the self-paced thing, because I have a friend, like we've both been like, hey, we're learning this coding thing. We've made pacts between us, like, oh, we're gonna get this done. The date is at this time. So we talk about it so much that it keeps the momentum going. It keeps both of us motivated. So that's definitely a good suggestion. And it's funny when you share with other people the goals that you have, you're more inclined to get them accomplished, because you feel like you have someone they're keeping you accountable. So because you've already made that promise to someone else, so you feel more inclined to get it done.
Yes, absolutely.
How accessible do you think that ADHD resources are? Do you think it's affordable? Because I think the main issue, and even out here, it's like a lack of affordability makes it difficult for people to get the help they want.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of barriers when it comes to accessing ADHD resources. One of the main ones is affordability. So it can be very expensive to get a formal ADHD evaluation and diagnosis. I know there's some companies working to change that. Like, for example, Marker Learning is a startup that is working to reduce the cost of learning disability evaluations. And they
I'm sorry, what's the
charge,
name? Margaux Learning? I don't mean to cut you.
oh yeah, Marker Learning. Marker
Marker?
Learning.
Okay.
Yeah. And we actually did an interview with their founder on our website on Kaleidoscope Society. She has ADHD and dyslexia. And through her experience, she wanted to make the process of getting evaluated and diagnosed just easier and more affordable. And so their company, they've been able to, I think they charge 25% of what typically you would have to pay to get an evaluation in the United States. So every country is different. Every country is different and has different processes and different resources and nonprofit organizations out there. But definitely, I would like to see that changing in the future. I know that some states are working on this. So like actually New York City, they have made learning disability testing. I believe it's free in public schools. Because actually, I believe the mayor of New York has dyslexia.
Oh, what's his name? Eric Adams, is that his name?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't quote me on this, on his full name. I'm not good with the remembering of the.
That's cool.
But creating screenings for public schools so that kids have access, right? So that it shouldn't only be like, if you have the money to get an evaluation, then you get it. And if you don't have the money, you don't get it, right? Because once children have access to an evaluation, and then parents and teachers kind of have a better idea what might be going on, then they can actually look at specific interventions to support the child in their learning and in their development.
Okay, how about let's talk about in the workplace. Like what strategies are there to make the conversation about ADHD open and comfortable?
Well, because there's a lot of stigma in the workplace. People are afraid of talking about these topics or sharing that they have ADHD or any type of other condition for that matter, because people are afraid that they're going to be judged or that people are going to think they're not as capable. So the first step is really creating education and awareness within the workplace. And so I really I get to come in and talk to companies. So I'll go into companies and do presentations about neurodiversity. And so that's a great first step companies can do, to bring in a speaker to open up the conversation, really just open up the conversation and share accurate information. And with a strength-based approach, right? With an approach that is empowering, that also highlights, look, there's minds of all kinds in the workplace. 1 in 5 of your colleagues and customers may be neurodivergent. And And this means that they may have certain challenges in some areas, but then they will have really incredible strengths in other areas. And so let's talk about how do we make a more inclusive environment so that everyone has the opportunity to be successful. So I think
So I don't mean to, I was just kind of curious. What are the common questions you get asked in the workplace about like the work?
Yeah, so one of the main questions is, should I disclose to my manager? A lot of people are nervous to share this information with their manager. In the United States, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act that prevents companies from discriminating against employees with disabilities. And it also requires employers, if the company has more than 15 employees, they're required to provide reasonable accommodations to support these employees. And a reasonable accommodation is any small adjustment to the job or to the work environment so that the employee can perform the role. And some of those things could be very simple, like if an employee needs to leave at 3 p.m. once a week to go to a doctor's appointment, it could be a schedule adjustment. So this person is going to come in early on Thursdays because they need to leave early. That can be an example of an adjustment. So that's one of the main questions, is just like, should I disclose to my manager? Another question people ask is, how do I get evaluated to find out if I have something? People ask how they can support themselves, how they can support other people. But it's been great to see that a lot more companies are wanting to create education and awareness about neurodiversity. So that's been a change that I've seen over the last 10 years, and it gives me a lot of hope for the future. Seeing that more schools and workplaces are starting to embrace this idea that there's minds of all kinds. And so how do we create a more inclusive environment?
That's good. It's funny because I was gonna ask you how you felt about the stigma at the beginning to how it has changed now, but yeah, you answered that. Yeah, I think out there still is. I still think there's a lack of understanding. I think a lot of us have a thing of, oh yeah, you have ADHD, but there's a disconnect between like the artists and like the people my age and the managers, the bosses. There still is a disconnect of that. Like there's a lack of empathy and understanding towards people that have ADHD. Do you have are there like any success stories you know of that inspires you in terms of someone with ADHD that is thriving? I feel like you have a lot of friends that you keep around you that kind of inspire you.
Yeah, so many success stories. And also, if people want to access success stories, kaleidoscopesociety.com features a lot of stories of women with ADHD, how they're using their unique ADHD minds to be successful, and also real talk about how they navigate certain things that are challenging. Their Attitude magazine is another great online resource. That is an online magazine about ADHD. Understood.org is a great resource for ADHD and learning disabilities. And they have a podcast that is all about ADHD stories. But if you look so we can start with famous people. Trevor Noah, for example, he's a South African comedian.
Really? He has ADHD?
Yeah, he has ADHD. He's publicly talked about it. He's also talked about depression and anxiety that has come related to his ADHD. And Trevor Noah, he's extremely smart, extremely funny, and has such an amazing perspective that makes him such a great comedian and political commentator. So, Trevor Noah, he's one example, right? Of course, Richard Branson is another example that is frequently cited. So he has ADHD and dyslexia, the founder of Virgin Airlines. So many artists, business people, journalists. So in the United States, we have Lisa Ling. She's an Asian American journalist, an award-winning journalist who also has ADHD. And growing up, she really had a lot of anxiety in school because of her ADHD. But when she was in high school, she had the opportunity to work on a TV show for teens as a host, and really fell in love with journalism. She tried to go to college, but it didn't really work for her. It just wasn't for her. And so she really just focused on developing her skills in journalism. And yeah, now she's a famous journalist on TV. So these are just a few stories.
Isn't
But
it
I
crazy
know,
how college is no more the success story? Like no, like more and more successful people are not really being tied to college anymore. So I don't mean to cut you, but I was
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think everyone has their own unique path, right? And for some people, the structured learning of a college environment can be really beneficial. And for other people, the traditional school system doesn't serve them. And we also know, I mean, college is not affordable for everyone. It's not accessible for everybody. So there's many different paths. And also with success is something we all define for ourselves. So success doesn't always have to look like being on TV, being famous. That may not be everyone's definition of success. For me, success for me is living a creative, joyful life, a peaceful life. And so for me, I make decisions around doing things to reduce my stress, to bring more creativity and joy in my day-to-day life. And so that to me is a successful life. And I think I'm so grateful that I did get that ADHD diagnosis 10 years ago, because it's just given me a little bit more self-awareness, as well as access to community of peers that understand me and we can support and uplift each other. And then access to learning strategies, day-to-day strategies that can just help me move through my life with greater ease.
My mom has been like trying to get me because my mom's an ADHD life coach. So every time she's like, there's so many communities for people with ADHD. You need to start getting. I'm just kind of like, whenever your parents tell you to do something, you don't want to do it. Yes. Yeah, so it's that. I'm just like, okay, sure. Yeah, but I mean, I have a lot of like support groups I have. But I haven't really looked at the ADHD support group out here, which I feel like I probably should. And I think I'll probably like utilize some of the ones that you've mentioned. Are there ones for men, or like, do you know any ones for like men specifically, or no?
Yeah, actually, my friend Mark started an ADHD support group specifically for men, men's ADHD support. He's based in New York City as well. And it's an incredible space for men to be vulnerable and talk about ADHD related challenges that they may not feel comfortable talking about. I know he's a big proponent of, having real talk around sensitivity, around, challenges that are specific to men. So I can send you the information after, and you can link it in your show notes for your listeners. I know that they have a lot of virtual meetups, so even people in Jamaica can tune in and join those. They do a lot of virtual events. It's a great resource. They're a nonprofit organization, so I would highly recommend.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. That is very much. It's funny, we were talking about that. A couple of my friends were talking about like still having a need. So as much as I've built this website and stuff, I think the next level of it is having meetups. Because like a friend of mine was saying, there's a need for that. Just have like a meetup. And I think I'm beginning to understand it now, where what I'm seeing is that, so therapy and like the idea of support group for men, it's for men out here. Let me clarify. For men out here, it's a lot of them do not like the idea because it's seen as, they see it as weak. I personally, I don't. But if you call it as like a reasoning or a conversation, it removes a bit of the stigma, and a lot of men are a lot more comfortable to open up. And so for them, what it would be is more going to a bar. It's not getting drunk or anything like that, but just going to a social setting and just like sitting down and talking and calling it a reasoning. And it was a pastor I interviewed him last week, that gave me that like suggestion of how he does it. Like he'll have a conversation, he'll have a reasoning, and it like removes, it allows men to just like, remove it softens the defense. And I'm just realizing there's a lot more of a need of group sessions of that? Because I realize, like, in the church, in the faith, like small groups are incremental for growth. And I realize, like, listening to you and how ADHD has worked, there's an incremental growth and support you get from small groups. Because you said it really well. Like, we are not meant to be alone. We're not meant to be isolated. So having these small groups really does help.
Right. And even strong men aren't meant to shoulder everything by themselves. You know, so many men have so much stress they're carrying, so much responsibility they're carrying on their shoulders. And it helps when you have a group of people where you can, you know, put that burden down for a minute and be able to just like share from your heart, to talk about what's on your mind. And that can be, and a lot of people do this already, you know, with their barber or with their friends in the bar or whatever it is, right? And so it's just so important, and men deserve that chance to be able to have a space where they can talk about what's on their mind and heart, not be judged, and be able to share vulnerabilities, because we're all human at the end of the day. And so having to put on a strong face or a strong mask, it can be very exhausting. So I think it's great that you'll be organizing some meetups. I think that's really powerful. And that will also be an approachable way for people to start getting support.
Okay, so you don't do you're not in the like producer field anymore at all. Like you walked away, you walked out of that field.
It was a transition. I was working as head of production at Yahoo in Silicon Valley when I started getting involved on a volunteer basis within my company and creating the first neurodiversity employee resource group within our company. And I just started slowly like ramping up and doing more and more within the accessibility and neurodiversity space. And I got to kind of a crossroads where I realized I can't do both at the same time. And I felt like producing was something that I could do and I was good at. But I felt like this work I was doing in the neurodiversity space, it was so needed. And I felt really like called to do that. And it was definitely a hard decision for sure, because I love working with creative people. I consider myself a very creative person as well. But I thought, let me go and see, let me go and work in this accessibility space and see. And I didn't know if it would turn out well.
Yeah, that's such a risk.
It was, and I was at the time, I was a manager in the organization. I had a team of producers. Like, I was finally feeling at the point where I was feeling confident in my career, you know, because in the beginning of your career, you're kind of like making it up as you go along and you feel like you don't know anything. And I was finally at the point in my career where I was like, oh, I actually know something about producing, and I have a team and I'm like mentoring others. And so it definitely was, I definitely did feel like it was a risk walking away from that, and then kind of not starting over, but then having to start building credibility and experience like in a whole other field. But it's been really fulfilling for me for sure. And I'm always looking for ways to do creative projects. Like in 2020 for Kaleidoscope Society, we produced a podcast called ADHD Decoded. And that was a lot of fun because I executive produced that. So I got to work with a graphic designer on the cover art, and I got to work with a production company who did, you know, the editing and producing of the actual audio content. And so bringing that idea to life was a lot of fun. And we had an amazing host, Amanda Fisher, who was a college student. She had reached out to me wanting to collaborate and volunteer. And so she was the host. And so that was a really fun creative project. And I'm always looking for ways to express my creativity in my work.
ADHD Decoded, is that your thing? 'Cause I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah, ADHD Decoded podcast. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much all the podcasting platforms if you search ADHD Decoded. The idea of that was we wanted to decode ADHD to make it easier to understand. And so it's on purpose. It's a mini series. It's only 7 episodes, and each episode is, I think, less than 30 minutes. Some of them are even shorter, because we really wanted it to be like a quick start guide for understanding ADHD. So if you're new to ADHD, it's a great place to start. And each episode, we have a different expert guest who breaks down like one aspect of ADHD. So whether that's like attention, emotions, structure and routine, etc., parenting. So yeah, check it out. ADHD Decoded. That was a lot of fun to work.
So what do you do now in terms of, for like you said, like what do you do to as a hobby to kind of release stress? If you're not doing as much creative stuff, no, professionally, like what are you doing as a hobby to release that stress and the type of stuff?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, dancing has been a source of joy and also stress reduction for me for years. I've been dancing for 20 years.
Salsa? Hey, hey.
This year, I actually got into Kizomba for the first time. I was in Cape Town a year ago over the new year. I was in Cape Town and I went to the Cape Town Salsa Festival. And I love dance festivals because they have instructors from, all over the country and globally that come and do different workshops and classes. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to meet people when you're traveling as well. And I took, I had seen Kizomba and I knew about it, but I took my first class and I thought it was really interesting. And so I took a few classes. And then I was in New York for work this summer and there was a Kizomba weekender happening. So I signed up for that. And so dancing for me with ADHD, it's such a great way to like relieve stress, also get physical movement because physical movement is so important for our cognitive functioning. So if you don't like going to the gym, that's okay. It's all about just finding any way to move your body so that you can support your brain function. And so for me, dancing is that. Also, it's a great way for me to continue to learn new things because it's, learning new things is fun and kind of keeps things interesting. And it's a great way to connect with other people, especially work.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, especially as an entrepreneur, like self-employed person, I love dancing because it's a way to be part of community and also like get to turn off my work side and just go somewhere where I don't have to show up and have work related conversation. I can just be free and
just chill.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can chill.
Yeah. See, did you do any surfing at all when you're in Cape Town as well? If you don't mind me asking.
I didn't do any surfing in Cape Town, but I know that they do have surfing there. I did grow up in California, so I did know a lot of friends that surfed growing up. I have surfed before. Actually, the last time I surfed was in Costa Rica in 2019.
Oh, you stay traveling, man.
Yeah, I love traveling.
Yeah,
I haven't been to Jamaica yet. That's on my
Yeah, what's going on? we have a good salsa night out here in Kingston too, man.
Do you dance salsa?
I've done it on and off, man. Like I can dance, like I can do my Jamaican dances, but salsa, like I did it when I was in Chile. I did it when I was like, I've done it a couple times, but it's just like I'll do it for like 6 months and then I'll come back and I'll just forget. And I'm like, oh man, I'll have to start over. Yeah. So and the thing is, I can dance, but like salsa for me is just I always feel like I'm starting from the beginning. That's what it is. I always feel like I'm starting over. So it's like, it's so annoying. Yeah, but you know what I mean? If you come to Jamaica, I'll definitely like, there's some good salsa spots. We have like a good salsa night. You know what I mean? But I hope you've never been here. It's really, it's really nice.
Yeah.
So what are like your future goals and aspirations for ADHD advocacy in the States?
Yeah. Well, personally, my future goals and aspirations with the work I'm doing with Minds of All Kinds, so my company, Minds of All Kinds, this next year, coming year, we're going to be launching our first peer educator program, a neurodiversity peer educator program, which will be a program where people can come and learn and gain the knowledge and skills and confidence to be peer educators in their schools or their workplaces or their communities. And basically, this is so important because of what we were talking about, right? A lot of people, especially with the stigma, they're more comfortable talking to a peer, somebody that is in their environment or in their organization, someone that comes from a similar background. And so disseminating helpful information through peer-to-peer support. So that we are going to be piloting that for the first time this coming year. And I'm really excited about that, especially because I've met a lot of people with ADHD and other neurodivergent people who are really passionate, and they want to be advocates. They want to help others, but maybe they don't necessarily want to go and become a therapist or go and become a coach because they love working as a designer, for example, right? They may like their career path, but they're like, hey, I want to be able to help people that are struggling. So with the peer educator program, they'll be trained and equipped to be able to provide peer support, be able to connect people to resources that exist, and be able to share helpful strategies with peers. So I'm really excited about that. We're going to be continuing to offer our ADHD education. So for the last 2 years, I've been running an ADHD program in partnership with Kathy Rashidian, who's a certified executive coach and ADHD coach. She works with the ADD Coach Academy. So she trains other ADHD coaches for the ADD Coach Academy. And so we ran this program for the last 2 years. We've had 8 classes graduate. Over 100 students graduated this program. It's a 9-week professional development program for adults with ADHD. So we're going to be evolving a bit in the coming year. So I'll still be offering some ADHD programs and workshops for adults with ADHD who want to learn more. So those are kind of the 2 areas that I'll be focused on this coming year. But I'm looking forward to just more awareness and more awareness of ADHD within the overall disability advocacy space and the overall accessibility field, and just more companies and workplaces understanding this is a real thing and looking to support their employees so that everyone can have an opportunity to be successful and to, be able to get a job and keep a job, and feel respected and valued within their workplace.
All right, I think that is a wrap for me. Oh wait, Margaux, where can people find you online?
Yes. So if you want to learn more about Minds of All Kinds, you can come to mindsofallkinds.com. And then for me, you can just search my name. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and those are the 2 main ones.
All right, cool. All right, thank you so much for doing this, Margaux. Really do appreciate you for doing this. Thank you. All right, guys, thanks so much for checking out this week's episode. Tune in next week. We'll have some more talks and discussions with other mental health professionals as well as advocates. Margaux, thank you so much for your time. Also, guys, remember to check out therapyja.com. You can find out more information on resources as well, and contact other therapists through our platform. Thank you so much, guys, and take care.